This section is titled The Cold War and the Idea of Freedom. And the focus question is, how did the Cold War reshape ideas of American freedom? The Cold War was an ideological conflict in which both sides sought to win support across the world. Freedom was central to mobilizing public opinion, and in the 1950s it was a prominent theme in academia, the media and mass culture, and government. The Cold War set the boundaries for understanding freedom. Culture and history were mobilized for the Cold War. Historians argued that the American creed of pluralism, tolerance, and equality had always defined American life and neglected the ways in which race and ethnicity had restricted freedom. The federal government pressed Hollywood to make anti-communist films, from which all references to racism were to be removed under a program called Militant Liberty. The CIA and the Defense Department patronized the arts, enlisting actors, dancers, and musicians to promote the superiority of American values at home and abroad, and sponsoring magazines and academic conferences. In fact, the CIA even funded the controversial abstract expressionist art of painter Jackson Pollock, whose canvases, created by dropping and splashing paint, were said to embody cultural freedoms absent in socialist nations, and they funded the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This was controversial, with some members of Congress preferring Norman Rockwell's portrayal of small-town life. The State Department assembled a diverse exhibition of contemporary American artists, but abandoned the project and sold the works at auction. In 2013, they were exhibited at Indiana University with the overall title, Art Interrupted. The Cold War's other master concept was totalitarianism. First used in World War II to describe fascist Italy and Germany as aggressive ideological governments that harshly controlled all of civil society and denied the rights and alternative values that might lead to social change, totalitarianism soon came to describe the Soviet Union and its allies. This concept helped spread the belief that powerful governments were the greatest threat to freedom. Whatever the Soviet Union supported was automatically deemed antithetical to freedom. The American Medical Association launched the largest public relations campaign in history against Truman's proposal for national health insurance, calling it, quote, socialized medicine, end quote. The Cold War also shaped the idea of human rights. World War II's atrocities and the Four Freedoms and Atlantic Charter sparked calls for a new global order ruled by universal rights for all of humanity. The war crimes trials of German officials showed that the international community would hold individuals accountable for violations of human rights. In 1948, the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR, drafted by a committee headed by Eleanor Roosevelt. It declared that all people should have basic rights to freedom of speech and religion, should be free from arbitrary government, and should enjoy social and economic entitlements such as housing, education, healthcare, and an adequate standard of living. Though the document could not be enforced anywhere, its assertion that governments were accountable for the way they treated their citizens became widely accepted. Debates over the UDHR showed the contradictions and tensions in the idea of human rights. The degree to which human rights should supersede national sovereignty, and who or what should protect the human rights that governments violate, are still unsettled questions. But the United States and the Soviet Union resisted the creation of a mechanism to enforce the UDHR because they feared outside interference in domestic and foreign policy. American leaders were particularly sensitive about race relations, which they feared might invite UN action against the United States. In the 1950s, Cold War considerations limited human rights, and both America and the Soviet Union used human rights for their own interests. The USSR claimed to provide its citizens with social and economic rights, while the United States criticized the Soviets for violating democratic rights and civil liberties. Only in 1992 did Congress ratify the part of the UDHR that covers civil and political rights. It has not yet ratified the Declaration's economic, social, and cultural rights.